My name is Jeanne Marie Benoit. I lived at 231 School Street, across the street from what is now the town hall. I was 6 years old when the flood came. The day of the flood, I was not in Putnam. I was in Webster, Massachusetts, at Lake Shagagagog, Manchagagog, Shabunagungamog. And as a kid, the neighborhood, we ran down to the water and kept measuring the water. And about every hour, it was going up by the inches. My father came and got us and brought us to Putnam, and I spent the rest of the time of the flood in Putnam. My grandfather made wine in the backyard, and the wine barrels were outside stretching so that they would be ready to take the wine. And that caught all of the water. So the people that lived in the 7 houses, that area that I was in, we always had water to wash and use because we were using the water out of my grandfather's wine barrels. When the flood hit, my mother made the family promise that I would not be exposed to it, and my grandfather said to me, "You need to see this." Across the street from us was the football field connected to the old Putnam High School, and he walked me across the field, and we stood there and looked at the water. I was fascinated. The water was spinning in circles. It had picked up the railroad tracks, and it created rounds in the railroad tracks, and the water was spinning. And as a child, I could have stood there forever. And he kind of said, "Well, maybe we need to walk back across the field." We got halfway across the field, and there was a huge sound. And I remember turning around and looking, and where I was standing had gone down the river. The trees and all the land was gone. And it's a memory, I think at that point in time I knew that the force of the water, that had I gone down, I never would have made it. And it's something that has stayed with me. I remember the explosions. My bedroom faced School Street, and the explosions were very, very bright. And I can also remember that night going into my parents' bedroom and telling them I was afraid. And my father looked at me and said, "Go to bed. I was in World War II and it's not going to hurt you." And it's another thing that stayed with me because as a child, my house was still, I was in fear of that house. And yet, go to bed. I remember the helicopters landing on the field because I had a front row seat. It was the distance of a road between us. And I can remember that they took the baskets, they caught the people in the baskets. The helicopter would hover, and they would let the basket down on the ground, and the people would climb out. It was almost like, and I think of it as a basket when you went to a store to buy fruits and vegetables, that type of basket. They would let them out, and then the helicopters would land. So I can remember watching them. They brought in the National Guard, and they put in temporary bridges. And the temporary bridge that bothered me personally the most was the one that went from just out of the parking lot we're in now and across where the railroad tracks were. That was a bridge made of wood and chains. And when my dad would take the car, we had big heavy cars back then and no seatbelts. And when he would ride on that bridge, the bridge would go down that would take the way to the car. I always felt we were going to fall into what was down below there. Scared stiff of going across that bridge. And then the last thing I remember are the shots in the arm. In my case, on our part of Putnam, we took the shots at the Elks Club. And they didn't care if you were children. You just went downside and you got them in both arms at the same time. You just walked in and they just shot you when you walked out again. I had missed one of those shots. And so we went to the doctor's office, and the nurse forgot to tell me, and I'm 6 now, forgot to tell me to keep my arm loose, and so I made a fist. I can still see it. It went under your skin, and she measured the size of the bump for how much medicine she was giving you. I couldn't open my arm for 2 hours because it went into the muscle. And as a child, that's something else that I remember. The neighborhood, how did it change? The neighborhood worked together very well that time. All of the neighbors knew each other, and as I said, we shared the water in my backyard. Putnam changing, I grew up from the time I started school, because that was my first going to school, first time, until I was a senior in high school. There was nothing where the shopping center is now. We used to call it the Sahara Desert, because there was absolutely nothing there, and Putnam offered us nothing. Very few stores, nothing for kids at all. And so most of my classmates left, and the kids in the years around us, it offered nothing. The changes, phenomenal. Once the shopping center went in, once the housing went in. And the other thing, people forget that the Hampshire Heights housing project off of Walnut Street, that originally was Quonset huts brought in to house the people that were displaced in the flood, and then it turned into the federal government housing project that's there now, again, also from the flood. So all of these changes have made Putnam a much better place to live.
Good job, Jeanne. Very good.